The will to win is not nearly as important as the will to prepare to win. Bobby Knight. So I took 1 week off, but I'm back. I sort of mentioned this in the first episode, but I'm not sure how often I'm going to upload these. It's not going to be every single week. It might be every other week, or maybe at times even less frequent than that. The reason is just because I believe there's a fine line between pushing yourself to be creative and create more content, and just creating content for the sake of creating content, which doesn't really have very much value. And I want to be careful not to cross that line and just make podcasts when I feel like I have something important that I want to talk about and can add value. I also have this weird voice in my head which tells me to just stop doing something, like usually 1 or 2 months after I start a new project like this podcast or my YouTube channel. I don't know why, I just will start hating it suddenly. And that has nothing to do with the feedback that I've gotten. In fact, basically everybody who's commented on this podcast has been super supportive. So thank you all for that. But yeah, I'm going to try to not listen to my self-critical voice as much and just keep pushing forward and see how many episodes I can do and see where this podcast goes. One other thing before we get started. In the last episode, I mentioned that I was creating a free random number generator app. That is up on my site now. You can go to mobiuspoker.com/RNG, RNG for random number generator. And I know that there are other poker softwares which have RNGs integrated into them, but this is more for if you want to keep it super simple and just have a good looking RNG that stays pinned to your desktop, and you can customize the settings and use hotkeys and stuff like that. So check that out if you're interested. I'm hoping this will be just a taste of what's to come, because I've launched public courses in the past year, 18 months with my hand-to-note stat checkers, but I also want to start releasing standalone poker software. So this is just sort of a little test, and that's why I'm releasing it for free. Probably won't be anytime very soon, but I do have a lot of really cool ideas for the future. So what I want to talk about today is optimizing your poker engine. What is your poker engine? Well, it's your entire game, and optimizing it involves everything that you do to keep yourself performing at the level that you're performing at. I use the engine metaphor because an engine has many different components that need regular attention and fine-tuning, and poker is the same way. There are so many different moving parts involved in your entire game, and neglecting any one of those parts will hinder your overall performance. I've always felt that in poker, it's really challenging to strike the right balance between reviewing stuff that you already know and maybe just trying to make small improvements on that versus researching new stuff and integrating completely new stuff into your game. If you focus just on review, then obviously there's going to be a limit to how much better you can get. If you focus entirely on new stuff all the time, well, you're not going to be able to keep up with all of the stuff that you're learning. And that's going to keep you from getting any better as well, because you're just going to keep chasing new concepts without ever actually really committing anything to memory over the long term. So let's break down a few of the different steps to optimizing your engine, and then I'll go over some solutions to how to handle this better, with the caveat that I don't really have a perfect answer for you. And at the end of the day, it really just takes working really, really hard. But there are definitely ways that you can organize that process better, and I will suggest some ways at the end. So the first part, I think the most important part, is your engine block, which is the core structure of the engine, and it houses all of the essential components. That is poker theory. Poker theory should form the foundation of your game. You need a solid theoretical understanding of core theoretical concepts at minimum and how they influence every decision at the table. These concepts would be mandatory defense frequency, optimal bluffing frequency, expected value, and then also dedicating time pretty much daily to study some individual sims as well, whether that's GTO Wizard or PioSolver or all of the other poker solvers and trainers out there. There may have been a time where you could get away without studying very much poker theory and still be a profitable player. But online poker is a lot tougher these days, and the number of sites that you can play on and get away with a strategy like that is rapidly reducing. So I think any poker player should be studying theory first and foremost. Let's take a quick break so I can tell you about my program, the Mobius GTO Stat Checker, which is now available for both MTTs and cash games. This program automatically compares your stats to solver data and pinpoints where you're off track, color coding your stats to show you where you're too passive or too aggressive compared to GTO. You can also use this program to analyze your opponent's tendencies and exploit their mistakes. For example, you can easily figure out how often your pool is bluffing on the river and therefore how often you should be bluff catching. Plus, it's great for evaluating the quality of your games. You can check the average win rate of the regulars in your pool or see how many hands in your database were played by recreational players. The Mobius GTO Stat Checker takes the guesswork out of your study routine so you can focus on fixing your leaks and exploiting the leaks of your opponents. This course includes video modules to walk you through how to use the program and a support channel to make sure that you never get stuck. You can click the link in the show notes to learn more about the Stat Checker and purchase a copy for MTTs or cash games today. Once you have your engine block in place, that's the most important thing. The next thing would be tuning your engine. So this is where I'll bring in studying exploits. Just like how you would tune your engine settings to improve your performance, in poker, studying exploits is about adjusting your strategy from a theoretical baseline to capitalize on your opponent's weaknesses. Against the average reg, those adjustments are going to be hopefully smaller because that player is playing a lot closer to theory and is more likely to counter-exploit you if you try to exploit them. Against a recreational player, you should be, in general, exploiting them a lot more because they are going to be playing a lot further from theory and also paying less attention to what you're doing against them. For exploits, I primarily recommend hand to note. I think that's the best single thing that you can do to learn how to exploit your population is just running your hands through hand to note and looking at different stats, seeing how much your pool is folding, how much they're bluffing in different spots. Next, let's talk about diagnostics, because if you're going to be spending time detecting your opponent's leaks, then you better be spending some time detecting your own leaks as well. And in engine optimization, engine leaks like oil or coolant leaks can cause a lot of damage if they're not addressed. Similarly, leaks in your poker game can lead to a lot of losses if your opponents identify those leaks, or maybe you're just making a lot of pure strategy errors and you're just handing money over to your opponents whether they exploit you or not. For example, you might be overfolding your big blind and just bleeding a little bit of money every single orbit without realizing. You need to be doing regular stat checks, either for yourself or having a coach do them for you so that you understand what your main weaknesses are. And that is also going to drive what is most important for you to study. Next, let's talk about testing and calibration. How do you fine-tune your engine for precision and make sure it's operating the way that it's supposed to? Calibrating your engine ensures that all of the engine components work precisely together. And in poker, this is analogous to doing drills in GTO trainers to fine-tune your decision-making skills. If you are a professional poker player, some sort of drills should be part of your daily routine. You can drill full hands. I actually prefer more deliberate practice and drilling specific spots. Ideally, these are high impact spots, so spots that just come up a lot and there's a lot of money going into them. So what that might look like is just, before you start a session, 15 minutes of defending your big blind in a trainer and defending versus 3-bets, something like that. Next, let's talk about upgrades. Sometimes there's a limit to how well you can perform with a given part in your engine. And sometimes you just have to take that part out and upgrade it with a new part. In poker, the way you upgrade your engine is to spend time doing your own research into new strategies, or investing in coaching, or spending time engaging with study groups. Depending on how much of an independent learner you are, you can decide whether you want to be putting more effort into doing your own sort of strategy explorations, or if you're somebody who just prefers to have someone else do the work and would rather just play, you can invest more into coaching. Next, if you're optimizing your engine, this is a step that I think a lot of people forget about, but you need to do regular maintenance. And what I mean by that is you just need to go back over the stuff that you have studied, whether you think you're still remember it or not, and just review it. And poker is just such a complicated game. Your brain can only retain so much information at one time. I think you'll be amazed if you go back and look at something you studied 6 months ago and just sort of quiz yourself on how much you remember. I bet you will have forgotten a lot. So there is actually quite a bit of low-hanging fruit to be picked just by going back and reviewing things that you have already studied, as opposed to always trying to learn something new. And as you are reviewing things, you might even find some little embellishments that you can make to your strategy, or you could find ways to simplify your understanding. Finally, let's talk about the cooling system. In engine optimization, the cooling system is what prevents the engine from overheating. And as a poker player, you also have to have systems in place to prevent yourself from burning out. You have to recognize when you're fatigued and when it's time to just stop studying, stop playing, and step away from the table for a while. And you need to understand the importance of rest and recovery. It's always good to take at least 1 day per week completely off from poker. I'm admittedly terrible at this. But even if you don't always take a day off, you still have to have some semblance of work-life balance. You should have hobbies outside of poker that you can sort of escape to. You should have strong relationships and not just like friendships with other poker players. I mean, actual relationships outside of poker. And that doesn't just go without saying because poker is such an isolating game. It is pretty easy if you don't put time and effort into forming relationships and maintaining them that you can just become a loner and become completely isolated. And that's not good, and it's also just going to accelerate your path to burnout. Okay, so now we've gone over a bunch of different steps to optimizing your engine. You have your engine block, which is building a strong foundation of poker theory, adjusting your engine for optimal performance, which is incorporating exploits into your game, diagnostics and detecting leaks. That includes things like stat checks, hand history review. We have calibration and fine-tuning your engine for precision. That involves doing drills. Upgrades involves doing coaching or personal study or study groups. And then cool down, which is rest and recovery. In engine optimization, your dashboard would be your display where you have all of your critical information about the engine's performance. And this lets you monitor your progress and helps you make informed adjustments. In poker, your dashboard doesn't need to be that complicated. In the last episode, though, I did suggest using Notion or any other note-taking app. I think that's really the best for just organizing your studies, keeping everything in one organized place so that you can go back to it quickly and you don't just lose things that you've learned. But you can also keep a lot of this process simpler and just work off of a whiteboard in your office or just have a little notepad and have goals for each day, each week, and each month. This is something that I personally do. At the beginning of every day, I set up some tasks and how I'm going to allocate my time for that day. And I also do the same thing at the beginning of every week and every month, and I just sort of brainstorm, what do I want to accomplish during this week or this month? I try to set up a reasonable list of goals and also prioritize those goals so that if I don't hit all of them, I at least hit the most important ones. Then at the end of each week or month, you take stock of what you did manage to accomplish. And if you need to work harder, then you do that. If you just obviously put way too much on your plate and just no way you could have finished all of this, then set more reasonable goals next time. But the point is that you need to have a plan, especially in poker where you don't really have very much control over your results in any given hand or even any given week. Poker is a marathon, and what really matters is the quality of your decisions over the long term. And if you're going to perform really well over the long term, you need to have a plan. So let's think about that Bobby Knight quote from the beginning of the episode. The will to win is not nearly as important as the will to prepare to win. That is really what is going to impact your results in the long term. It's how organized you were, how prepared you were, and ultimately how effective you were at carrying out this plan to optimize your poker engine. One last thing I just want to stress is not just planning out what you're going to do, but also planning out how much time each thing is going to take. And for this, I'm going to recommend the Pomodoro technique. Pomodoro technique is basically just setting a fixed period of time for study, or also for playing if you want to track your sessions, and then taking regular breaks. So you might work for 50 minutes and then take a 10-minute break, then work for another 50 minutes, take a 10-minute break. And I actually just bought something to help me with this because I tend to kind of lose myself in my work and I don't take breaks. So I'll just work for 3 hours and I won't even realize that I'm getting tired and I'm getting sloppy. And then I will get a headache. You know, it's just not optimal. So I bought this thing called the Time Timer 3-inch visual timer. And it just allows you to set a timer, but it has a built-in progress bar. So you can actually see the time winding down. And it's really nice because it just kind of keeps you attentive to how much time you have left in your allotted block of time. And I found that it helps me stay on track. If I'm going too slow, I'm getting caught up in minutia, I'll notice, oh, I only have 15 minutes left. I better hurry up and get this task finished. Because again, poker is such a complex game. You can't just set aside an hour and just sort of screw around with your study time. You have to be attentive all the time when you're working. Otherwise, 2 years are going to go by and you're going to realize that the competition is passing you by. And it doesn't seem like it's that important at the time, but in hindsight, you realize that you will ultimately get penalized for wasting time during your study. So you can check out the Time Timer on Amazon. All right, that's all for this episode. Thank you guys for listening, and I'll catch you on the next one. Good luck at the tables.